Good morning, or depending when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokémon trading card game. And you're listening to PTCG Radio on what is a very special day, because this is actually the 150th edition of PTCG Radio. Now, there were 2 weeks which were lost. Somebody a while ago was trying to go through a complete rundown of every episode, trying to listen start to finish, which I applaud anyone for trying to do that. Partly an ego boost and partly there's 150 of them. And somebody suggested that 2 of them are missing. I don't know if they're just not on in the archive, whether I misnumbered them or what happened. But I'm saying 150, gosh darn it, and I am sticking to it. So for anyone that's been listening, whether this is your first episode or whether you've listened to all 150 dating back over 3 years now, back to around this time in 2012, I thank you very much for listening to me ramblings, letting me have a few minutes in your ear here and now. I very much appreciate it. Now, it's not going to be a particularly special podcast today to mark the 150th. What I am going to do is I'm going to start a new YouTube channel called Wassy Plays. Now, don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, PTCG Radio, the YouTube channel will be completely unaffected. I'm currently in the process. I recorded 5 games at the League Challenge at Nottingham this past weekend. The first weekend with Lysandra's Trump Card Band. 2 of them are commentated. The other 3 I'm going to get to over the next couple of days. And all 5 of them will be going up over the next week or 2. We are going to naturally slow down the uploads a little bit because the national stuff had to get up there, but I can't keep up pretty much a video a day for obvious reasons. I'm also going to do a video opening some fake Spanish cards. I haven't done a box opening before. Because these are so fantastically, brilliantly fake, I thought it would be a fun idea to open some of them, do a bit of a box opening. I think some of you might get a kick out of watching it. Now, my new channel is going to be called Wassy Plays, and if you're listening on Wednesday, it's not up yet, but it should be up Thursday or Friday this week. It's going to be on retro games, it's going to be on new games, and the videos are going to be, shall we say, slightly better produced than PTCG Radio. I've been spending some time on Photoshop and Camtasia learning to use some stuff, so hopefully you'll get a kick out of that. And what I ask is, if you're listening to this, just take a minute. I don't ask you very much, but you take a minute, tweet out a link to my new YouTube channel, stick it on your Facebook, or go and tell some friends about it. Try and help me spread the word about my new channel, Wassy Plays. I'm going to be tweeting out a link as soon as it goes live, so look out for that. And please, ladies and gentlemen, if you could give me a hand, I would very much appreciate it. But anyway, let's talk about the now. And now we have some interesting news. I'm going to give you a sneak preview of next week's podcast, whereby we're going to be talking about the top decks for US Nationals with Lysandra's Trump Card Band. And then we are going to be talking about the cards you should take note of from Bandit Ring, which is going to be printed in the US, Europe, etc. as Ancient Origins on August the 12th. So starting off, ladies and gentlemen, we have had our full tins revealed. These are the tins which are going to be coming out in August, if I remember correctly, certainly not too long away. And let's get the bad news out in the open first of all. We are not getting a Shaymin EX tin. And generally with the tins, they tend to be fairly recent, so the chances are we're never getting a Shaymin EX tin. Which is annoying, but there's nothing you can do about it. So it is time now to go and pick up those Shaymins. You're going to need them. 2 as a minimum, but I honestly would recommend picking up 4. It goes back to my podcast a couple of weeks ago when I was talking about budget decks. It's got to be done. If you want to be competitive in this format coming up after Worlds, you've basically got 2 choices. You can get a bunch of Shaymin, 2 to 4, or you can play anti-Shaymin decks, relying on things like Wobbuffet and Silent Lab, but you are going to have, your options are going to be constrained if you go down the second route. So, the tins we're getting Rayquaza EX, hopefully the colourless one from Roaring Skies, that's the best one, but no confirmation yet. Latios EX, the one that's got the attack which does 40 damage on the first turn of the game for 1 psychic energy, which I think is a good card that people are going to be using. And Hooper EX, which is going to be a very good card. That's the one that we've already seen spoiled from Bandit Ring. We're going to talk about it a bit today, but essentially it allows you to search for free EX Pokemon, and for any EX based deck it's going to be an incredibly valuable card. So decent tins, not amazing, but if colourless Rayquaza, the one from Roaring Skies, is in the tins, and actually that's 3 pretty good tins. So we know that we are going to be getting Break Evolutions in the new set. Now, we don't know too much about them. Now, we do know we're getting a couple of decks. There is going to be Golduck Break plus Palkia EX deck. And we know that there is going to be a Raichu deck coming out and a Noivern deck coming out, all of which revolve around these break packs, these break mechanics, if you will. Now, all we know at the moment is it's been announced that in order to break evolve, you need a break card, the pre-evolved Pokemon, and the evolved Pokemon. Now, the break card is going to be a trainer of some kind. It's neither Pokemon, it's not Pokemon. We assume it's not energy. That would be weird, otherwise it would say energy. So we can assume it's a trainer of some kind, probably an item, and it will probably work fairly similar to a Pokemon tool. The question is it going to allow you to evolve into a... I mean, there's basically three options of what it could be. It could just be like a Spirit Link, or kind of like a Delta Evolution Spirit Link, by which I mean it allows you to evolve the Pokemon the turn you put it down, so you don't have to wait to evolve. That's one thing it could mean. The second thing it could mean is that it allows you to evolve and you get a bonus from evolving. So an example would be, use this card to evolve into Break Raichu, Break Raichu's attacks do 20 more damage, something like that. Or it could be that the Break Pokemon, you actually evolve into a Break Raichu rather than just a regular Raichu, so it's kind of like a special kind of Pokemon. I don't know. I can only imagine it's one of those three. It either facilitates faster evolution, gives you a bonus upon evolution, or allows you to evolve into a more powerful version of the Pokemon. No announcements yet, so I'm going to leave it there, but just wanted to let you guys in on what I think is likely to be the effect. Now, there is an ancient trait Sableye which has been revealed. This is going to be a promo in Korokoro Ichiban. This is a Japanese magazine. Second attack, 20 damage for 2 colourless energy. Nobody cares. It has got Fate to Stop, which stops the effects of all of your opponent's abilities done to Sableye. So Crawdaunt's not getting rid of your energy, for instance. But it's got one interesting attack. I say interesting, not good, because I don't think it's particularly good, but I do think it's pretty interesting. And the attack reads Energy Hunt. Flip 3 coins. For each head, search your discard pile for a basic energy card and attach it to one of your benched Pokemon EX. Now, essentially, that means that you've got a very, very good chance of attaching 1 energy, and an outside chance of attaching 3 or 0. You've got a 1 in 8 chance of attaching 3, and you've got a 1 in 8 chance of attaching 0, which is pretty good going, to be honest with you. Now, that could be used for EX decks. Think something along the lines of a Groudon or a Kyogre. One of these energy-heavy EXs. This could really, really help you get going much more quickly. It is a flippy card, and we are losing Fliptini, assuming that Legendary Treasures rotates, and I still think it's going to be XY on, but some people have even started publishing actual articles on quite good Pokemon websites about the fact that, it's going to go XY on. It's not confirmed yet. I think it's safe to assume, but actually writing articles, doing proper things about it, I disagree entirely. So, no, not going down that route. If Legendary Treasures stays and we get to keep Fliptini, that's the one that has the ability that allows you to reflip coins for an attack, i.e. flip 3 coins for Sableye, and then with Fliptini you can just flip them again if you don't like what you got. That's really good. On its own, I don't know. It doesn't do any damage, but it's a fun little thing anyway. And the only other thing I really want to talk about this week is... Well, actually, no, sorry. We're going to get on to that in a second. We're going to get on to the new set. I don't want to get on to the new set just yet. We've got a couple other things to talk about. I want to give a quick update on my top 22 from last year. So last week, I had a bit of a moan. Now, I did make a mistake. I started talking about travel bursaries to nationals as if they were travel bursaries to worlds. So that was where the top kind of 32 get a grand and the top 64 get $750. They were travel awards to nationals, not worlds. However, I still stand by what I said last week. In fact, it backs up my argument. They are still giving out more paid trips to Worlds than they have in previous years, and they're giving all these bursaries for nationals as well. Now, I talked last week about the cutoff for top 22, and I'm focusing on Europe here because this is what all my friends are kind of following and talking about. And as I've said, Pokemon have stopped updating the online standings to try and stop what's actually happening. But the cutoff has now officially gone above 900 points in Europe. That means that in order to get a top 22 invite, and a top 22 invite, remember, gets you automatically into Day 2 of Worlds. Everybody else has to go into Day 1 and fight into Day 2. And it gets you a paid trip to Boston, 5 nights in a hotel and the flights out there. And the cutoff is now 900 points, or over 900 points. But remember what I said last week. Let's assume you hit all your best finish limits with wins. You will have won 4 regionals and got 600 points. You will have won 4 cities and got 200 points. You would have won 6 league challenges and got 90 points. That means you have won 4 regionals and 4 cities and 6 league challenges. You've maxed out your best finish limits with wins. You would be on 890 points and not get an invite on top 22. It really, really favours people who have done well at Nationals. And somebody like myself, now this year at Nationals, as I hope you all saw, I was commentating at UK Nationals. I didn't play because there was something else I was doing instead. So if I had gone this year and maxed out my best finish limits, winning everything along the way, I would not have a top 22 invite because I didn't do well at Nationals. It means you can basically win every tournament you go to all year, but you don't get into Day 2 of Worlds automatically because you didn't do well at one tournament. Not a big fan of that. Here's another problem. I was there at the weekend. I went to a League Challenge in Nottingham. I'll give you a quick rundown of that in a moment, actually. But like I said, I've got 5 games recorded that are going to go up on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/PTCGRadio. And they're going to be going up there over the next week or two. Probably the first one, or I think the first video will be going up end of the week, maybe beginning of the weekend. I've just uploaded, I think, 10 videos from Nationals. So I'm giving the Nationals videos a few days to breathe before I start uploading new stuff. Because the more new stuff I upload, the more people don't watch the old stuff. So I'm leaving it a little while to give people a chance to watch the Nationals videos. And then I'm going to start uploading some new stuff as well. And that's when they're going to be going up. But I had people that were following Danish Nationals. Now, this could be a coincidence. It's a heck of a coincidence. But it could be a coincidence. I have no proof to show that it wasn't. But going into Danish Nationals, pretty much the last of the European Nationals, when everybody has worked out how many points you need for top 22, even though Pokemon's not publishing it on the website, everyone's worked it out. There were 2 Danish chaps that had the possibility of getting a top 22 invite. And by the most coincidental of coincidences, they were the 2 people that made the final and got the largest amount of championship points in Denmark. What are the odds? Now, I have had unconfirmed reports of them being scooped further along in the tournament, of somebody, I think one of their top 4 opponents posted on Facebook, I didn't scoop, but my lone scrap got donked both games, or something along those lines. Again, I have no proof that this is true. I am making no accusations against anybody. What I am saying is, it is one huge coincidence that there were 2 people from Danish Nationals that really needed the maximum number of points to try and get top 22, and that they ended up in the final. Now, to confirm what I need to tweet this out this week at the Wassy, but to confirm what I've get wrong a couple of times, there are 3 European Nationals that get a paid invite for the winner. It is England or UK, Germany and Italy, not France. I keep saying France get a paid invite for the winner, they don't. I was speaking to lovely Benjamin Pham at the weekend. He came along to some of our league challenges in the UK, got an extra 45 points by winning 3 league challenges, and actually has put himself in a decent position to get a top 22 invite. He won Dutch Nationals a couple of weeks ago. I've got him on a couple of the videos, actually, you can see on there. He won Dutch Nationals. He doesn't have a paid invite. He has apparently been going to Dutch Nationals for 10 years. And he wins it this year. And it's the first year that he hasn't had, that the winner hasn't had a paid invite. I think he's got a right to feel aggrieved. How do Pokemon fix this? Simple. Don't give top 22 paid invites, give top 16 paid invites, and give a paid invite to the winner of every Nationals. Because if you're in top 4, and from what I've seen, UK Nationals especially, you got 1 box for top 16, and top 8 and above got 2 boxes. So if you're in the top 4 playing against somebody who could get a top 22 invite and you can't, then essentially, if you scoop to them, you get a different wording on your trophy. If you beat them, you get a different wording on your trophy. You don't need the championship points because you can't make top 22. You've already got enough points for an invite. So you've already got 2 boxes. So literally you are switching from a semi-finalist trophy to a finalist or champions trophy. That's the only difference. And if you're playing against someone you know and like, who the game could be the difference between a paid invite to Worlds or not, you're going to scoop. And that is reportedly what's been happening at a lot of European Nationals. People have just been scooping, giving free wins to their opponents so that their opponents can get into the top 22. Here's the problem with this, and I've been arguing this for scooping into Top Cut for years now, pretty much since I started the podcast. Scooping to your opponent to get them into Top Cut or to get them into the top 22 in Europe is not a nice thing to do. It doesn't make you a nice person. It's the equivalent of giving a cake to one person over another. If you scoop one person into Top Cut, you necessarily have to scoop one person out of Top Cut. Similarly, if you are scooping to your opponent in top 4 of Nationals so that they get into top 22, you are screwing over somebody who has earned their way into top 22. So it drives me crazy to no end. It really, really annoys me. But hey-ho, what can you do? That's my solution. If you could get a paid invite for winning Nationals, nobody's scooping in top 4. Not if there's a paid invite on the line. Speaking of Danish Nationals, what is interesting is that in the top 8, we saw 4 Landorus bats, neither of which made it to the final. 2 Trevenant Gengar decks, one of which made it to the final. And 1 Night March, 1 Groudon deck. And in the final, Trevenant lost to Groudon. So we had Groudon winning, Trevenant coming second, and overall the top 8 was made up of 4 Landorus bats, 2 Trevenant Gengar, 1 Night March, and 1 Groudon deck. Seismitoad nowhere to be seen, and if we look at these decks, you can understand why. Groudon has an amazing Seismitoad matchup. Now that Lissandra's trump card has gone away, Trevenant Gengar gets a lot better, and Seismitoad doesn't. Trevenant Gengar poisons with Gengar. They don't just get to use this Hypnotoxic Laser, and they can block trainers much earlier. Seismitoad has to rely on using only, 4 lasers, 4 Crushing Hammer return at the maximum. So Trevenant becomes a better play than Seismitoad because they can lock supporters early and poison with Gengar, as long as you can get a consistent list, of course. Night March has got better with Lissandra's trump card being banned because you're doing more damage for every Pokemon in your discard pile, and your opponent can't make you shuffle them all back in. Groudon's just good, to be honest. I don't think it's particularly affected one way or the other by Lissandra's trump card being banned or not. It's just a very, very strong deck. And Landorus Bats, again, gets much, much better because it doesn't have to put up with... It was one of those decks that didn't do so well against these super fast Seismitoad decks. And I encourage you all to check out the video of Michael Cornwall's fighting bats against Ollie Fenley's Seismitoad Shaman, which I uploaded from the top 8 of UK Nationals to my YouTube channel. And you'll see how the matchup went. And essentially what happens is your Landorus Bats deck just can't compete. Too many lasers, too many hammers. Take that all away, Seismitoad gets hurt, Landorus Bats comes back. Now, I made a list, and next week I'm going to properly go through the decks to play for US Nationals. But because you all might want to do some testing between now and then, I'm going to give you, in no particular order, my top 5 decks. And spoiler alert, I'm just adding Rayquaza. So my top 5 decks, in no particular order, are Night March, Colourless Rayquaza, because Nat's gotten a lot better, because it used to really struggle against Seismitoad because they could get rid of all of your energy every turn. They can't do that anymore. They're limited to the amount of hammers they can play. Fighting Bats, Groudon, and Trevenant with Gengar. They would be my top 5 decks. I'm going to go more into detail with them next week, but I've given you a quick preview this week. I've told you just a couple of sentences about each of those decks and why they're good. I encourage you all to go and have a play with those decks over the next week or so. Next week, I'm going to give you a full preview of US Nationals, and we're going to talk in great detail more about these decks. So, let's have a chat about this new set then, this Bandit Ring. Now, the good news is a lot of these cards we've actually seen before. So what I'm going to do is any of these cards that we've seen before, I'm going to go just a little bit faster. Go back through my last couple of podcasts. I've been going through these cards as they've been revealed. So the last kind of 3 or 4 weeks, you'll hear me talking about some of these cards, and fairly early on in the podcast. So if you haven't heard them, just go and listen to the beginning of the last few podcasts, and before we get into the main bit of the podcast, you'll hear me talk about the new cards that have been revealed, many of which are from Bandit Ring. So we'll go through type by type with a couple of exceptions. So we start off in grass, and we start off with Vileplume. Vileplume has a garbage attack. It's a stage 2, it's got a retreat cost of 3, it's looking pretty bad until you read the ability. As long as this Pokemon is in play, both you and your opponent can't play item cards. It is universal item lock for both players, with no exceptions. Silent Lab gets rid of basic Pokemon's abilities. Wobbuffet gets rid of psychic Pokemon's abilities. Vileplume gets rid of everyone's abilities, other than, of course, Vileplume. Think of it like Garbodor, but for both players. It's going to be a powerful card. People are going to make this, especially with decks that revolve around special conditions. It's going to see a fair amount of play. Continuing on in grass, we've got Blossom. It's not a great card. Stage 1, 120 HP. But it's got an interesting attack. For 1 grass energy, it does 20 damage and switches to the bench. These are what I call hit and run attacks. Now, there is, I believe, a Chloritza, which is going to stay in the format, which is a water Pokemon that does 30 and switches back to the bench. It doesn't do enough damage. 20 damage isn't enough. Donphan has been the Pokemon that's really been our good hit and run Pokemon. But the thing about Donphan is he starts off with 40 damage, and then you've got strong energy, and you've got fighting stadium, as long as muscle band. Only doing 20, and only being able to put a muscle band on with no strong energy or stadium or anything like that, I just don't believe Blossom's good enough. Grass has got a lot of support coming this set, but I still don't think Blossom's good enough. One card that is good enough, and I haven't done my top 10 cards of Ancient Origins, and I'm not going to until the set officially drops in the UK in August, or maybe actually a little bit earlier, but certainly I'm not doing it until we've had full confirmation of the UK set. There is let's say a rumour going around that we're going to be getting a Full Art Steven. I've yet to see confirmation of the Full Art Steven. Now, I've also been at a school triple day, so maybe confirmation's been leaked while I haven't been looking. But we don't know what's going to be in the set yet. We've got a good idea, but not a perfect idea. There is a missing card. Everyone thinks it's going to be Full Art Steven, but I'm going to wait for my top 10 list until then. Remember, the top 10 lists go on YouTube, not on PTCG Radio, the podcast. But one card which I'm pretty sure is going to make it, or at least is going to be pretty gosh darn close, Ariados. You play it just for the ability. Once during your turn, it's called Poison Nest. Once during your turn, before you attack, you may use this ability. Both active Pokemon are now poisoned, excluding grass Pokemon. You would want a 1-1 of this as a minimum in any grass deck whatsoever that you ever play. Because why wouldn't you? Just free poison. Now, you're probably not, and again, no confirmation yet, you're probably not going to have Burbank City Gym, so it's only going to be 10 damage between turns. You're not going to be able to put them to sleep like you would for Hypnotoxic Laser, but it's an extra 10 damage every turn, and that's assuming they get out the active. Otherwise, it starts adding up pretty quickly. Now, we are skipping over the EXs for now. There is a Virizion in grass, 2 moderately useful attacks. For 1 grass energy, search your discard pile for 2 Pokemon and put them into your hand. Could be useful with Lysandra's trump card going away. But the item Sacred Ash that allows you to shuffle 5 Pokemon into your deck is better. It's also got an attack for 2 grass energy, 40 damage, or 120 if you are behind in the game, if you've got more prize cards left. However, it takes 2 grass energy, and we don't have great grass acceleration, especially with Rizian EX probably rotating. Now, I've told you about the ancient trait Vespiquen. It's got Fated Double, which means you can attach 2 Pokemon tools to it. Think 2 Muscle Band. And it's got 2 interesting attacks, both of which I quite like. For 1 grass energy, you can do 20 damage and heal as much as you do. 2 Muscle Bands is 60 damage, heal 60. Or for a double colourless energy, flip 3 coins 30 times the number of heads. Again, Legendary Treasures Fliptini is probably rotating, which will hurt the playability of this card. The Vespiquen I didn't get to talk about, and I had a really interesting email just last night from one of my listeners about this card, saying I need to talk about it. I'll see if I can find his name in a moment. He is absolutely correct. It is an amazing card, and I don't know if it's the best card from the set, but my absolute favourite card from this set is Vespiquen, the non-ancient trait, which is weird because they do this, Entei in this very set. They do this sometimes where they release ancient trait and non-ancient trait of the same Pokemon in the same set, and the general rule has been that the ancient trait one is pretty good and the non-ancient trait one is utter garbage. Not with Vespiquen, ladies and gentlemen. This Vespiquen is amazing. This Vespiquen, in fact, is Flareon. Now, anyone that's been listening to this podcast for a while will know I don't have many big achievements in the Pokemon trading card game. I'm one of these players that rarely plays the best deck and goes along and has too much fun and I don't always take it seriously enough. I play more socially than I do seriously, but I have my achievements. I top cut UK Nationals with Don Fan Prime, and I grinded into Worlds the 1 year I went. And my other of the 3 big achievements, as far as I can see, is that I last year in fact, got 5th at the ECC playing Flareon, and this was before Flareon was cool. And the attack is, it was Vengeance, I think, of Flareon. I really should know what it was called. I think it's called Vengeance. It did 20 damage, plus 10 for each Pokemon in your discard pile. Vespiquen has the same attack, but it's called Be Revenge. 20 damage, plus 10 for each Pokemon in your discard pile, and it's for a double colourless energy. But Vespiquen is better than Flareon. As much as I hate to admit it, because Flareon's cooler. A couple big advantages. Firstly, we got Battle Compressor. Secondly, we've got the stadium that allows you to evolve to Vespiquen on your first turn. So if you go second, you can Be Revenge on turn 1. And Unknown is coming out in this set. Now, we'll get to Unknown in a minute, but Unknown has an ability where you discard it and draw a card. Which means every time you draw an Unknown, you get to draw a card, assuming that abilities aren't turned off. You get to draw a card and you get to put an extra Pokemon in the discard pile. It's amazing. Big fan. Big fan. By the way, I've just realised a moment ago when I was talking about Vileplume, I was talking about trainers and then I started talking about abilities. Vileplume is not like Silent Lab or Wobbuffet. Vileplume turns off trainers, not abilities. I'm silly. It's like a Trevenant for both players. There we go. My apologies for that, ladies and gentlemen. That was a silly mistake. The analogy was good, but I should have just been talking about trainers. Back to Vespiquen. I love Vespiquen. It is dying to be played with Unknown and Battle Compressor and the new stadium and Ariados and Muscle Band and all of that, and it's just brilliant. It's Flareon with better support, by which I mean Unknown and the stadium primarily. I'm excited about this card. I've already drawn out a Vespiquen list that I'm a big fan of, and when Ancient Origins is released, I'm going to go find me some League Challenges straight away, and I am going to be playing Vespiquen. Speaking of which, people have been asking me for a while about box openings, so just to make it nice and clear, just to confirm, I am going to do a box opening of Ancient Origins. I've never done a proper box opening before. I've gone and watched a few to see what they're like. I've been asked a couple of dozen times now if I'm going to do them by various people. So, rather than fight it anymore, I'm going to do me a box opening. Yay! So, the next cards I'm going to talk about, we're going into fire, but I'm actually going to break the mold. I'm going to talk about 3 in 1. Flareon, Leafeon, Vaporeon. They're not great cards in and of themselves, but they've got very good abilities. Flareon makes all your Stage 1 Pokemon fire as well as their original type. Vaporeon makes all of your Stage 1 Pokemon water as well as their original type. And I'm sure you can figure out what Jolteon does. It makes all your Pokemon, Stage 1 Pokemon, electric as well as their original type. So in a Stage 1 deck, say, Vespiquen, it means that what you can actually do is cover 4 types. Well, 4 types if you're not playing a grass deck. So Vespiquen, you can play... so you're hitting 4 types. Because you've got grass, and fire, and water, and electric. It's quite fantastic. It is, in fact... It's a really good thing. So there's a Vaporeon that does water, there's a Flareon that does fire, there's a Jolteon that does lightning. There isn't a Leafeon, by the way. I think I lied about that one. If I said Leafeon, I didn't mean to. It's the 3 original evolutions. Flareon, Jolteon, and Vaporeon. All of them work. Now, one thing that interests me, are they going to keep going? Is there going to be an Umbreon that makes your Stage 1's Dark type? Is there going to be an Espeon that makes your Stage 1 Psychic type? Is there going to be a Sylveon that makes your Stage 1's Fairy type? We don't really need a... I suppose we could Leafeon for grass. We don't need a Glaceon because it would do the same thing as Vaporeon. But we could end up with a fleet of Pokemon, so you can have your typings being Fire, Lightning, Water, Dark, Psychic, Grass... and Fairy, as well as your original type. It makes it very interesting. Makes me sad that the Plasma Storm Donphan has rotated, because I would like to be playing Donphan and being able to hit for a whole bunch of weaknesses. So yeah, very excited about them. We have 2 Entei. The one with Ancient Trait we've talked about before. It's got Fated Double, so you can have 2 Pokemon tools. And it's got a decent attack for a fire and a colourless. It does 30 damage and reduces the damage done to it by 30. For 2 fire and a double colourless, it does 130 damage. And if you flip tails, it does 30 to you. It's fine, but it's not terribly exciting. Sorry. There is a non-Ancient Trait Entei. Now, for a colourless damage... it's got Burning Scent, discard the top 4 cards of your deck, attach any fire energy you find there to your Pokemon in any way that you like. Now this I like. It's dodgy, it's a gamble, but you could, if you were very lucky, be attaching 4 energy on the first turn of the game for a single energy. That's pretty good. He's also got 120 HP, so he might not get KO'd too quickly. And you can use this to... build up Pokemon like Rayquaza or Dragon Rayquaza, any Pokemon that have got colourless or fire components to their attack cost. Or indeed, you could use it for something like Camerupt DX. Camerupt DX relies on you having lots of energy in the discard pile, attached to your Pokemon. This can help you to do that. It can also do 20 damage plus 20 more for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon for 2 fire energy. If your opponent's got a full bench, that's 120 damage for 2 energy. I'm going to be honest, it ain't great, but it's a first attack for Entei that makes me not very, but a little bit excited. Now there are also 2 Volcaronas. The one that has the Ancient Trait has Fate to Stop, which is the one that prevents effects of abilities done to Volcarona. For a fire energy... 20 damage, flip 2 coins, 20 more for each heads. It's underpowered on a Stage 1. And 80 damage and forces your opponent to switch their active. They get a choice for a fire double colourless. I can see this seeing some play if grass gets as big as it could from this set. But then again, I'd rather play something like a Vespiquen with a Flareon than play a Volcarona. The other Volcarona... it's got one interesting attack. For a colourless energy, it's a Stage 1, 100 HP. For 1 energy, for a colourless, search your deck for a basic Pokemon, put it on your bench, attach 2 basic energy cards from your deck. Now, you need a few things. This could be good in almost any deck with Wally. And I really like this card. I think this card's going to fly under the radar. What you do is you start with a Larvesta, and you play a Wally to evolve to Volcarona, you attach an energy. It's colourless, so this would work in any deck whatsoever. And then you use the attack Sunbath, and you've got a Groudon with 2 energy on the bench. Heck, if your Volcarona survives, and bearing in mind if it's benched at the end of your turn, it's ready to be evolved next turn. If your Volcarona survives, you can just go energy switch, and you've got a Groudon with 4 energy ready to go on turn 2 of the game. Now that involves a lot. It's a heck of a combo. Because you would have to get the Larvesta and Wally on turn 1 with an energy. And then you'd have to get the energy switch Spirit Link Mega Groudon on turn 2. But that's not impossible to do, especially now that we've got things like Unknown and Shaman. I can certainly see Volcarona being played in a deck with high energy attackers. And honestly, my first thought here is Groudon. He's the one I would personally go for. I would make a deck, and the good thing about Groudon is you can use things like Scorched Earth, the Stadium, to allow you to draw cards, and Unknown and Shaman, to increase your chances of hitting a turn 1 Wally. And bearing in mind, although you probably want to play 4 Larvesta to increase your odds of starting with it, you would only need to play maybe 2 Volcarona, because you can just Wally for them. And then you can potentially have your Groudon going turn 2. If you are, if you go, well, it would have to be your second turn if you went second, maybe your third turn if you went first. But if you can, if your opponent's had 2 turns, and then you're hitting them with a primal Groudon, that's going to be hard to go up against. Now, as we've talked about a couple Pokemon that have Ancient Trait and Non-Ancient Trait, let's do another one. Gyarados. The Non-Ancient Traits, I just really don't like it. It's just rubbish. It has got an attack for a water and 3 colourless energy. And you flip a coin for each water energy. The attack does 30 more damage for each heads. So if you get a bunch of water energy on it and hit a bunch of heads, I mean, on average you'll hit 2. So it means you'll be doing 150 for 4 energy. It's all right on a stage 1, I'll give you that. But it's not great. The Ancient Trait one has a massively over price second attack, although gorgeous artwork. Some of the artwork in this set is fantastic. And the Ancient Trait Gyarados is a beautiful card. It's got Fated Double, you can attach 2 Pokemon tools. But it's got the attack counter attack. It's very complicated. Double colourless energy, 30 times the number of damage counters on your benched Magikarp. Magikarp has still 30 HP. So best case scenario, 3 Magikarp on your bench, each with 20 damage on, which means 6 damage counters in total, and then you can do 180 damage. Although actually no, best case scenario, you could get this Gyarados going with Archie's Ace in the hole, so you don't need to evolve it from Magikarp. So you can have 4 Magikarp on the bench, each with 10 damage on, or 20 damage on, which would actually then give you 8 damage counters and do 240 damage. It's not going to work. Let's just make that really clear. Yes, this Gyarados can, in theory, do 240 damage for a double colourless energy, and that'll KO Mega EXs. But trying to get 3 or 4 Magikarp on the bench with 20 damage but not 30 is dangerous. And all your opponent needs to do is play something like a Trevenant, and they'll be knocking out 3 of them in one turn. Anything that does bench damage, basically. Sorry about that. Magikarp, interestingly, it's got an attack for 1 water energy. It does 30 damage, flip 2 tails. If 2 coins. If either is tails, the attack does nothing. Yeah, that ain't seeing a lot of play. There is a Regice. Now, it's got an attack for a water and a colourless. Flip a coin. If heads, they're paralysed. 30 damage. Regardless. It's alright. The attack I do like, water double colourless, 70 damage, during your opponent's next turn, prevent all effects of attacks, including damage, by your opponent's Pokemon EX. This is Camerupt, who can be seen on the Nottingham League Challenge videos that will be going up on my YouTube channel soon, or Sizor that Luke Kirkham had some success with in the UK, or it's kind of turns it into a pseudo safeguard Pokemon, like your Sigilyph or your Suicune. Moving into electric, there's only one non-EX I quite like, and it's Rotom. First attack's garbage. Second attack, double colourless energy. Flip 3 coins. For each head, choose a card from your opponent's hand without looking, have them shuffle it into his or her deck. Now, if you can play red card and then hit 3 heads in a row, your opponent's going to have 1 card in their hand. And that is clearly going to be hilarious. Not for your opponent. Your opponent would probably be less than chuffed about that. I, on the other hand, would find that hilarious. So, an interesting attack, too flippy, and once again, I've got to point out the fact that we are going to be losing, we would assume, Flip-Teeny, the one that allows you to reflip coins, if you don't like what you flip from your attack. But an interesting card, shall we say. Moving into Psychic, we have Unknown. We've talked about him before. It's amazing. If he's on your bench, not in the active, you discard him and draw a card. This means that worst case scenario, you just draw a card and thin your deck, go through your deck faster. Best case scenario, you're playing something like Vesperquen that wants stuff in the discard pile, and you're actually adding to your attack while drawing a card. There is an ancient trait Baltoy that's got Fate to Stop, stops all effects of abilities to him. It's got a fun little attack Future Spin for a Psychic Energy. Look at the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck and put them back in any order. That's kind of cool. I kind of like that. I don't think it's ever going to see much play, but it's kind of fun. Similarly, Claydol for 1 Psychic Energy allows you to remove the top evolution card from each of your opponent's Pokemon and put them back into their hand. Mostly that'll do nothing because they can just re-evolve next turn. But if they've got a stage 1, they then wouldn't be able to evolve it to a stage 2 because they'd have to evolve to the stage 1. If they've got enough damage on the Pokemon that it knocks out, so let's say for instance they've got 90 damage on a Donphan, Donphan goes back to the hand, 90 damage is enough to KO the Phanpy. Or if you've got something like an Archeops down which stops your opponent evolving, those would be situations where the attack would actually be good. Mostly, it's not great. There is an ancient trait Golurk, again with Fate to Stop, so abilities can't affect it. It's got an ability that makes it both psychic and fighting, i.e. strong energy, fighting stadium, all this is up for grabs. 4 colourless energy, 80 damage, or 120 damage plus 20 to you. It's overpriced for what it is. It doesn't quite do enough damage. And that's a shame, but there's not really very much you can do about it. Now, moving into fighting, there's a Regirock, and as much as Regice hates on Pokemon EXs, Regirock does as well, although it's not quite as good. Regice, remember, does 70 damage and stops EXs attacking it. Regirock does 60 damage, again for a fighting double colourless, as opposed to water double colourless for Regice, same cost. But it does 122 EXs. And remember, you've got strong energy and fighting stadium and all of that. So with a Muscle Band Fighting Stadium, you're doing 160 to an EX. Add a single strong energy. So if you've got strong double colourless Muscle Band Fighting Stadium, then you're actually doing 180 and KOing EXs. That's pretty good. It's not amazing, but it is pretty good. In Dark, there's 2 interesting Pokemon in Dark. We've got a Sableye that we've talked about before. For 1 Dark Energy, you get to choose a supporter card in your opponent's discard pile and use its effect as your attack. I don't think this is why Lissandra's trump card was banned. I really don't. Lissandra's trump card was stupid at UK Nationals, and this card ain't coming out till August. But it's a fun little attack. And it goes back to, I mean, it really makes you think of the old Sableye that had the overeager, a body back then to let you go first, that allowed you to kind of discard a supporter and use it as your attack. So I like the Sableye. And there's a Malamar. 1 decent... No, I'm lying to you. 2 interesting attacks. And beautiful artwork. For colourless energy, switch your opponent's active Pokemon with 1 of his or her bench. The way that's written, and again, not the final translations, as I always say, these could change in the UK, but I use Pokebeat because they tend not to. You get to choose, and the new one is confused. For only 1 energy on a stage 1, that's pretty good. Second attack for 1 dark energy, 30 damage, and take a card from your discard pile into your hand. And that's really good. Reusing special energy. or a 5th trainer that you like. Things like that are really, really good. Now, going into Steel, there's a Registeel, and again, it's got one good attack for, well, in this case, Metal double colourless, and it hates on EXs. 70 damage, but if the Pokemon's an EX, you discard an energy attached to it. So all the Regis are coming out here and hating on EXs for 1 coloured and 2 colourless energy. So, interesting. Of the 3, I think Regice is the best one. But I kind of like Registeel. Especially if you can combine it with a Xerosic or a Crushing Hammer to get rid of 2 or 3 energy in a turn. I kind of like it. And carrying on this kind of new thing of some of the ancient trait Pokemon actually being worse than their non-ancient trait counterparts, we got 2 Metagrosses. Now, the ancient trait Metagross has Fated Double. You can have 2 tools attached to it. It's got double colourless energy. It does 20 damage plus 10 more for each card in your hand. Now, that is a stage 2, remember, it's Metagross. That could be amazing if you can get a big hand going, especially if N is rotated out, although there is a new supporter which is going to potentially take N's place. And for 2 metal and a double colourless, 80 damage. Next turn, the attacks done to it are reduced by 20. It's overpriced, it ain't much good. However, the other Metagross I like. Now, you would have to combine this non-ancient trait Metagross with your Bronzong to accelerate energy. But it's got a good ability and a good attack. The ability is Magnet Warp. Once during your turn, you may switch your active Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. And if you do, your opponent switches their active, as it's written their choice. The attack for 2 metal and a double colourless. Oh, by the way, sorry, that attack, it's a free switch every turn you want one. But also, if your opponent's got one Pokemon in the active that you don't want, sometimes you can force them. I'll give you an example. I had a situation at the weekend where my bench was 2 Donphan and a Hawlucha, and I had a Donphan active, and my opponent, I had 3 Donphan on the bench and a Hawlucha in the active, and my opponent played an Escape Rope. And had I had a second Hawlucha benched, I would have been fine. But I didn't. So my opponent forced me to put a Pokemon I didn't want to, and I then had to do less damage to guide you spinning turn for 40, when as I could have used, had I had a Hawlucha on the bench, I could actually have used Wreck to get a KO. So, yeah, that's how interesting this can be. But the attack, you'd use it with Bronzong, 2 metal, colourless. Sorry, 2 metal, 2 double colourless. Let me try that one more time, ladies and gentlemen, for prosperity. 2 metal, 1 double colourless. 4 in total. 80 damage. If you discard all metal energy, it does 160. This is better than Dialga EX. Now, it is a stage 2, and that's a problem. It's going to take a bit of time to get out. But you can get this going in 1 turn. Bronzong attaches 2 energy from the discard pile. If you've got 2 Bronzongs out, you attach a double colourless energy, you discard the 2 metal, you do 160 damage. Oh yeah, and then you can essentially have an automatic switch using his ability. You can switch him to the bench, and then put the energy back on with Bronzong. It's crazy good. That Metagross is really, really good. You can do 160 damage. You add a Muscle Band, it's 118. You're essentially KOing everything. And not only that, but you then get to essentially automatically get out of the active whenever you want with the ability. And if you've got a free retreater on the field, you can actually switch to the free retreater, put the energy back on the Metagross you've just discarded 2 metal, put them back on with Bronzong, and then immediately retreat and attack with the same Metagross again. Ladies and gentlemen, this Metagross is pretty good. So moving into Fairy, we've got the Gardevoir we talked about very recently. It's got the ability which heals 20 damage from each of your Pokemon every turn, and that's pretty useful. It also allows you to snipe for 50 damage for free colourless energy, or indeed hit the active. It's not terribly great. It's not terrible, but it's not amazing. Now, Whimsicott's got an interesting attack. It's a stage 1 fairy Pokemon. But what it actually does is, for 1 fairy energy, It allows you to choose one of your benched Pokemon and move all damage counters on your benched Pokemon to your opponent's active Pokemon. So, if you've got, say, 200 damage on a bench Mega EX, you could move on to your opponent's active EX and knock it out. Very niche. It's going to be hard to actually get going, but it's interesting nonetheless. Now, there is a Goomy, which has got a brilliant ability. It evolves into Goodra, if you're wondering. You attach a water energy to Goodra, and then you get to search for a second Goomy and put it on your bench. Sorry, you attach your water energy to Goomy, and you get to search for a second one and put it on your bench. That's kind of cool. Goodra sucks. I suppose it hits any Pokemon on the field. It does 20 damage for a double colourless energy for each energy in its retreat cost. But even a massive retreat cost Pokemon's only going to have 80. Having said that, sniping on the bench for 80 damage is kind of cool, but it's not amazing. I hate to break it to you, it's fine, but it's not good. Now, there are new Porygon cards. This makes me happy. There is an ancient trait, Porygon Seed, that's got Fate to Stop, can't be hurt by abilities or indeed affected by abilities. It allows you to remove any evolutions you want, as many as you like for a colourless energy, from your side of the field. Bit weird. The it could be good, for instance, by getting rid of the Mega EX so that you can attack with the EX, kind of like Devolution Spray back in the day. I think that was in Dragon's Exalted Devolution Spray came out. But to be honest with you, you don't want to use an attack to get rid of a couple evolutions on your side of the field. The non-ancient trait's kind of interesting. For free colourless energy, you do 70 damage and increase your opponent's attack cost by 1 colourless energy. Interesting. Not great, but interesting. Now, we're running out of time today. Now, I believe I've talked about all the EXs before, so we're going to leave the EXs till next turn for now. For next week. Just a couple of other things before we go, though. It's been confirmed that the gold secret rare trainers are going to be energy retrieval and trainers male. And it has been confirmed that, at least in Japan, the secret rare shiny primal Pokemon, your Primal Koga, Primal Groudon, and Mega Rayquaza EX, they are just reprints with Theta Max, and they are indeed the only Pokemon that have Theta Max. The only 3. That's where you evolve and get rid of all the damage on them. They seem to be only available as secret rares. There are no non-secret rare equivalent in the set, but just to be perfectly clear, they are all inferior to the non-secret rare ones. So it's really not a big deal. It's not particularly great, but they're in the set anyway. Looking at the EXs, we've talked about most of them before. Sceptile's very, very promising because it can do 100 damage and attach 2 grass energy to bench Pokemon and heal both the ones you do. Kyurem EX is just bad and overpriced. Mega Ampharos does 120 damage or indeed 150 plus paralysis and 30 to yourself. That's really good. Hooper's got a terrible attack, but has got an ability that allows you to search for free Pokemon EXs. Machamp is almost good. Tyranitar EX is crazy good, but takes 4 energy. But then it does 110 damage plus 60 more for each damage counter on the opponent's active Pokemon. Hello, Mega Tyranitar Bats. And Lugia EX is Mewtwo in a less favourable metagame, so 20 damage times the amount of energy attached to both active Pokemon for a DCE is not quite as good in this format as it has been. We're going to talk about all them properly next week. We're going to give them the time they deserve. I'm going to give you a good rundown of the EXs next week. Again, that was just a little kind of preview. We've talked about them all before. One that we haven't talked about enough is Giratina EX. And it's good. It's got an ability, Rebellious Wave. Prevent all effects of attacks, including damage, done to this Pokemon by your opponent's Mega Evolved Pokemon, i.e. it's immune to Mega EXs and Primal EXs. Remember, Primal count as Mega Evolved. And for a Grass Psychic double colourless, it's a dragon, so it can use both double dragon and double colourless energy. 100 damage, overpriced, but the effect makes it worth it. During your opponent's next turn, he or she can't play any Pokemon tool, special energy, or stadium card from his or her hand. They can play Pokemon, basic energy, supporters, and items. If you have a Vileplume in play, they can only play supporters, Pokemon, and basic energy. That is going to greatly reduce the options that they have. And it's weak to Fairy. Now, couple of things. Firstly, when this broke, everyone was like, oh my god, Giratina! But let's be clear on something. It's easily countered by things like Florges and Gardevoir. It's not amazing if you're trying to counter it. Secondly, it takes 4 energy. And I know it can be too special, but it still takes 4 energy to do the attack. And it's best used with something like Vileplume, which is going to make it a pretty slow deck. But when it gets going, if you're not deliberately countering it, it's going to be a powerhouse. It's going to be very good indeed. Now, trainers, again, we're going to look at trainers properly next week. So we're 55 minutes in. Not going to 150 minutes for the 150th episode. Nobody wants me to do that. But I am going to give a very quick rundown of the trainers, most of which we've seen before. And I will stop very quickly on ones that we haven't seen as much. So, at a brisk pace, Eco Arm allows you to shuffle 3 tools from your discard pile back into your deck. Now that Trump Card's been banned, that could be really useful for things like Muscle Band. Paint Roller allows you to discard a stadium, draw a card. Any item-based draw is always good, although we have been spoiled with Acrobike, Trainer's Mail, Unknown, etc. So whether we need any more item draw is irrelevant. I know Unknown isn't item draw, but it still reduces the need for item draw. But it allows you to discard your opponent's stadium, which in some games is absolutely huge. Level Ball is getting reprinted. We've talked about that. It's amazing. Lucky Helmet allows you to, if you're damaged by an opponent's attack, draw 2 cards. It adds consistency in other decks, especially if you're using a Pokemon that's got Fated Double and can have 2 tools attached. You could put 2 of them, and when you get attacked, you have 4 cards, and that's going to be a huge advantage. Something to watch, of course, is people who play this every so often are going to get decked out, because you can attack your opponent, and remember, you lose the game if you are unable to draw a card at the beginning of your turn. So if you draw all of your cards based on a Lucky Helmet attack by your opponent, it then immediately goes to your turn and you lose. Sceptile, Ampharos, and Tyranitar all get Spirit Links. We knew they were going to. Their EXs, Mega's coming in a set. Hex Maniac stops abilities for a turn. We've seen that before. It's pretty good. But it's going to be awkward because it stops you drawing cards with supporters. But in the right engine, with Unknown and Shaman and all of that, and your item draw, you won't need supporters as much to draw, so you can afford things like Hex Maniac. Giant Plant Forest is a stadium that allows you to evolve grass Pokemon as soon as they go down. It's amazing. Bad Energy is Rocky Helmet in an energy for dark Pokemon. You attack. When you get attacked, your opponent takes 2 damage counters. It stacks, as we think. So if you've got 4 bad energy, your opponent gets 8 damage counters. It's not good enough to see play. Flash Energy is a lightning energy which takes away weakness, but I think I gave a good argument a couple of weeks back for why I don't think it's actually going to see any play. Gutted. The 2 which I haven't talked much about, firstly, Color Drained City. Between turns, place 2 damage counters on each Mega Evolved Pokemon in play. This is the kind of stadium you play if you don't have a stadium to play. I was talking about Latios the other day in the podcast, and I was basically saying you don't play a stadium to benefit Latios. There are no stadiums that benefit Latios. I think I was talking about the possibility of pairing Latios with Wobbuffet and then using Dimension Valley to help out Wobbuffet. Because sometimes you don't need a stadium. So you could put Color Drained City out there just in case you come across Mega EX decks. An extra 2 damage counters in between turns, effectively adding up to 4 a turn, that's pretty good going. Certainly, if you have a deck which has a weakness to a particular Mega Evolution deck, say you've got a big weakness to Groudon or Mega Manectric or Mega Sceptile, this could be something to consider putting in your deck. And the other one is Ace Trainer. I mentioned this very briefly earlier. It's kind of like the new N. Now, you can only play it if you have more prize cards left than your opponent. So this is going to become more like a Xerosic or a Lysandra than it is an N or a Juniper. You'll play 1 or 2 in your deck. You will try and discard it as early as you possibly can. Every deck pretty much plays 4 VS Seeker at the moment, so you play it with a VS Seeker rather than just playing it normally. So you can only play it if you're behind in the game, if you've got more prize cards remaining than your opponent. So you would basically play this off a VS Seeker, trying to discard it as early as you possibly could. And then it provides the same kind of effect that N does. Each player shuffles their cards in, you draw 6, your opponent draws 3. Now, if you're down 6 prizes to 5, i.e. your opponent's taken 1 prize, you've taken none, and then you play Ace Trainer, that's going to be really annoying for your opponent. Very annoying. Remember, of course, that Teammates is a card that does a similar kind of thing and is arguably better, so let's not go crazy here, but it's an interesting card. And that, as we reach the hour mark, is all the cards you need to know about from Bandit Ring. Now, we only very briefly went through the EXs, because we've done so before, and we skipped through the trainers a bit, because most of them we'd seen before. But next week, as well as bringing you the decks you should be looking out for and testing for US Nationals, and I gave you my top 5 as of today right now, but we're going to do that properly next week. Next week, we're also going to stop a little bit and have a look at these trainers and the EXs. But we've had a bit of a chat this week. As always, follow me on Twitter at the Wassy. Check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/PTCGRadio. And one last appeal, guys. I'm putting an awful lot of time and effort in at the moment trying to make this new YouTube channel Wassy Plays. I'm going to send a link out over Twitter and on Facebook and all of that. But I implore you all to please check that out. There's going to be all kinds of interesting videos over the next couple of weeks about video games, and the more people that subscribe and watch the videos, the faster and more frequently I am going to go about getting all of these things on. So please check that out, hook us up, make us feel wanted and appreciated and good, and make sure you look after yourself until next week. My name's Ross, and you've been listening to PTCG Radio.